The bulldozer's engine was still running when Vanessa Cole planted her heels in the mud and said it. "Mr. Kessler, this peninsula belongs to the association now. You're trespassing on your own family's memory, and frankly, that's not our problem. 25 cabins, $92,000 each. That's $2.3 million sitting in a shell company's bank account, collected from families who thought they were buying a piece of paradise on a quiet finger of land jutting into Miller's Lake, Texas." I stood there in my boots, 68 years old, watching a woman in a white blazer and $400 sunglasses point a clipboard at the dock my great-grandfather built with his own hands in 1911. By the end of this story, Vanessa Cole would pay back more than that $2.3 million, and it wouldn't be the money that broke her. It would be a single sheet of paper, folded 4 times, that had been sitting in a fireproof box in my closet for 30 years. I didn't say anything to her that morning. I just took out my phone and I started recording. See, here's the thing about HOA presidents and property developers. They've gotten used to homeowners folding. They send a letter, a fine, a threat about liens, and people panic. They pay, they move, they apologize for existing. I don't panic. I spent 31 years examining land titles for 3 different Texas counties before I retired. I know what a real deed looks like. I know what a fake one looks like. And I knew, standing in that mud in my work boots, smelling diesel exhaust and cut pine and lake water, that Vanessa Cole had made the worst mistake of her life. She sold something she never owned. 25 families were about to lose their vacation cabins. One widow down the shoreline was about to lose a lot more than that. A woman who'd already given this country more than anyone should have to. And one HOA board was about to learn that the man they'd been mailing violation notices to for 6 months wasn't just some cranky old veteran living alone on a point of land. He was the man whose signature was on half the deeds in that county for 3 decades, and he still had the original patent. Stick around, this one gets ugly before it gets satisfying, and trust me, it gets very satisfying. My name is Walter Kessler. Friends call me Walt. Enemies, lately, call me a lot of other things, mostly to my face, which I appreciate. I prefer people who yell at me directly instead of hiding behind a homeowners association letterhead. I was born 40 minutes from Miller's Lake, in a farmhouse that doesn't exist anymore, but I grew up on the peninsula. That thin, crooked finger of land, maybe 11 acres total, has belonged to my family since April of 1911, when my great-grandfather, Elias Kessler, filed a federal homestead patent on it. He'd come out from East Texas with a mule, a wagon, and a wife who apparently could outcuss any man on the county line, according to my grandmother. Elias built the first cabin himself, hand-hewn cedar beams, a stone chimney he hauled rock for 1 wheelbarrow at a time. There's a kitchen table in that cabin right now. Same table, built in 1911, notched and scarred, 1 leg slightly shorter than the others because Elias never got around to fixing it in 40 years of living there. My grandfather ate breakfast at that table. My father proposed to my mother at that table. I did my homework at that table by lantern light before the electric lines finally reached the point in 1958. There's a small family cemetery under 3 live oaks near the North Shore. Elias is buried there. So is my grandfather, Thomas. So is my father, Raymond, who passed in 2009. 3 generations of Kesslers looking out over the same water forever. I left for the army at 19, spent 6 years in the Corps of Engineers, came home, and instead of going back to farming, I went to work for the county examining land titles, abstracts, patents, easements, mineral rights, the whole tangled mess of who legally owns what in Texas. I did that job for 31 years. I retired at 63 with a pension, a bad knee, and more knowledge about property law than most attorneys I've met. 2 years ago, my father's estate finally cleared probate, and the peninsula came to me, free and clear, exactly the way it had passed down since 1911. I moved back into the old cabin. I smelled the cedar smoke, the lake water, the diesel from my truck idling in the drive, and I thought, finally, some peace. I was wrong. Because while I was still overseas doing my last engineering contract 8 years back and then settling my father's affairs the last 2 years, a woman named Vanessa Cole had been busy. Vanessa was 54, president of the Millers Lake Shores Homeowners Association, and, as I'd later prove in front of a judge, the sole managing member of a shell company called Blue Water Point Holdings LLC. She drove a white Lexus SUV that never seemed to have a speck of dust on it. She wore blazers that cost more than my truck payment. She carried a clipboard everywhere, like it was a badge of office, like it made whatever she scrawled on it legally binding. She'd convinced the association's board, a tired collection of retirees who trusted her because she smiled a lot in meetings, that the peninsula, my peninsula, was unclaimed common recreational area, left over from an old subdivision plat. She got the board to vote on a resolution. She hired a survey crew. She platted out 25 cabin lots along the shoreline, right over my family's land, right over my grandfather's grave line, and she sold every single one for $92,000 apiece. $92,000 times 25 is $2,300,000. Every dollar of it went through Blue Water Point Holdings. Not $1 of it ever should have existed, because Vanessa Cole never owned so much as a square inch of that land. She just didn't know yet that I still had the paper that proved it. Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. I remember that time exactly because I wrote it down the second it happened, and I've written it down every time something happened since. Old habit from 31 years of title work. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. If it's documented wrong, that's worse. I was replacing a gutter on the north side of the cabin when I heard trucks. Not one truck, 3. A crew cab hauling a flatbed with a mini excavator, a dump truck, and a black pickup with Millers Lake Shores HOA magnetic decals slapped on the doors, crooked, like somebody had put them on in a hurry that morning. They drove straight down the gravel lane my great-grandfather cut through the cedar break in 1911, straight past the mailbox with Kessler stenciled on it, straight onto my property. I climbed down off the ladder slow, didn't run, didn't yell. I've learned that yelling gives the other side something to record and use against you later. I just walked to my truck, got my phone, and started filming. The crew foreman, a young guy, maybe 30, looked embarrassed the second he saw me, was unloading survey stakes with pink ribbon. Behind him, the excavator operator was already lowering the bucket toward a stand of post oaks near the shore. Trees that had been there longer than the state of Texas had been a state. "Morning," I said. "Mind telling me who authorized this?" That's when Vanessa Cole stepped out of the black pickup, clipboard in hand, sunglasses pushed up into blonde hair that didn't move in the wind. She had that particular walk people get when they've never once in their life expected to be told no. "Mr. Kessler," she said my name like she was doing me a favor by knowing it. "This is Association Common Ground. We're clearing it for the recreational lot development. If you'll check your HOA covenant packet, section 4, "I don't have a covenant packet," I said. "I've never joined your HOA. This land was never platted into your subdivision. It's a federal patent tract, and it's mine." She smiled the way people smile at children who've said something cute and wrong. "Everyone's grandfather has a story, Mr. Kessler. But the recorded plat says otherwise, and the recorded plat is what the county recognizes. Now, I'd hate to have to call the sheriff about interference with a permitted operation." "You do that," I said. "Call him, I'll wait." She didn't call him. She turned around, told the foreman to keep working, and got back in the truck. I filmed the excavator take down 4 post oaks that afternoon. I filmed the survey stakes going in a straight line about 60 yards from my family cemetery. Close enough that I could read on the excavator operator's face that even he thought that was too close. I filmed the flatbed leaving at 5:14 p.m, and I wrote every timestamp down in a notebook I've kept since my army days. The same notebook habit that kept me alive doing engineering surveys in places where a wrong measurement got people killed. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it myself, 10:02 a.m, Friday. Inside was a Notice of Association Violation, my name spelled wrong, Kessler with one S, citing unauthorized structure encroachment onto common recreational property, and a fine of $1,500, due within 30 days, or a lien would be filed against the Kessler parcel. I sat down at my great-grandfather's kitchen table, ran my thumb along that scarred edge where 4 generations of Kesslers had rested their elbows, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the sloppiest, most arrogant thing I'd seen in 3 decades of reading land documents. Here's what most homeowners don't know. An HOA cannot fine you, lien you, or restrict your property unless your parcel is legally subject to a recorded declaration of covenants that runs with your specific deed. Not the neighborhood's deed, yours. If your land was never platted into that subdivision, no board resolution, no bylaws, no clipboard in the world gives them jurisdiction over it. Texas Property Code, Chapter 209, protects homeowners inside an HOA from abusive enforcement, but it only applies if you're actually a member in the first place. I wasn't a member. I'd never been a member. My great-grandfather's patent predated the entire subdivision by 60 years. I didn't argue with the letter. I didn't call Vanessa Cole screaming. I photographed the envelope, the postmark, the letter itself, front and back. I filed it in a folder labeled HOA Evidence, dated it, and I started digging. That's when I met Loretta Vance. I'd seen her cabin before, small place on the eastern curve of the shoreline, maybe 400 yards from mine, faded blue shutters, an oxygen concentrator humming through a screen door I could hear from the water some evenings. I didn't know her well. I'd been overseas or handling my father's estate most of the years she'd lived there. But 2 days after my own certified letter arrived, I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked in her gravel drive, and I walked over. Loretta Vance was 78 years old, a widow for 11 years, and a United States Army veteran herself. She'd served as a nurse in the early 70s, something she mentioned only once, quietly, like she still wasn't sure people wanted to hear it. She answered her door with an oxygen line clipped under her nose and a stack of papers in her trembling hand. "They say I owe $4,000 in fines," she told me, voice thin. "Overgrown lawn, unauthorized shed, unapproved paint color. I painted that shed the year my husband died. Nobody said a word for 11 years. Now suddenly it's a violation." She looked up at me, eyes wet. "They said if I don't pay, they'll put a lien on the house, and I'll lose it in the foreclosure sale. I'm on a fixed income, Mr. Kessler. I don't have $4,000. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise, recognition. This was the same signature, the same handwriting, as my own fake violation notice. Same clipboard and sunglasses arrogance applied to a woman who couldn't defend herself in a fistfight, let alone a legal one. "Don't sign anything," I told her. "Don't pay anything. Give me copies of every letter you've gotten. Every one." That night, sitting at my great-grandfather's table with Loretta's papers spread out next to my own violation notice, I finally pulled the box down from my closet, the fireproof box I'd kept since my father passed, containing the original 1911 Federal Homestead Patent signed under the authority of the General Land Office, describing the entire 11-acre peninsula by metes and bounds down to the pecan tree at the northern point. I compared it, line by line, to the recorded subdivision plat Vanessa Cole's HOA had filed at the county courthouse. And that's when I found it. The plat didn't just carelessly overlap my property line. It swallowed the entire peninsula whole, cemetery, cabin, shoreline, dock, and all 25 feet of the water's edge, and relabeled it Tract R1, Common Recreational Reserve, Millers Lake Shores Subdivision. Dated 3 years earlier, filed while I was still overseas. I pulled county tax records the next morning, first thing, using an old login I still had from my abstracting days. 25 separate warranty deeds, each conveying a waterfront cabin lot carved out of Tract R1, each one selling for $92,000. Each buyer's payment routed through an entity called Blue Water Point Holdings LLC. Blue Water Point Holdings LLC had one registered agent, Vanessa Cole. 25 lots, $92,000 each, $2,300,000 sitting in an account controlled by a woman who was fining a 78-year-old widow $4,000 for a shed she'd painted the year her husband died. This wasn't neighborhood pettiness anymore. This was fraud, on paper, with my great-grandfather's land as the collateral damage and Loretta Vance as the human shield Vanessa Cole was using to make it look legitimate. I closed the folder, looked out the window at the lake my family had lived beside for over 100 years, and for the first time since I'd come home, I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt patient. I sat there a long while, listening to the lake slap against the dock pilings, thinking about Elias Kessler hauling stone for that chimney, one wheelbarrow at a time. He never had a law degree. He never needed one. He just had a patent, a mule, and the stubbornness to file paperwork correctly the first time. I figured I owed him the same courtesy now. The next morning I drove the gravel loop around the peninsula's edge, past the new survey stakes, past 2 cabins already framed up on pilings that had no business being there. A man in a golf shirt was unloading lawn furniture from a truck bed onto what used to be my grandfather's hayfield. He waved at me, friendly, the way new neighbors do. "Morning," he said. "Rick Halloway. Just closed on lot 14 last month. Quite a spot, huh?" Association rep said this whole point used to be some kind of family homestead, real historic. "It still is," I said. "Nobody told you the seller never owned it?" He laughed, uneasy. "Come on now, I've got a deed, title insurance even." I didn't argue with him. Title insurance on a fraudulent chain of title is worth exactly the paper it's printed on once a court voids the underlying conveyance. But that wasn't a conversation for a gravel driveway on a Wednesday morning. I just nodded, wished him luck, and drove on. Loretta Vance was on her porch when I stopped by that afternoon. Oxygen line looped over her ear, a cardigan pulled tight even though the day was warm. She'd made sun tea, the old way, glass jar on the porch rail since sunrise. "They called again," she said, before I'd even reached the steps. A young man, very polite, said if I sign a waiver agreeing to relocate, they'll forgive the fines and even give me $2,000 for moving expenses. She poured me a glass with hands that shook just slightly. I told him I'd think about it. "Walter, I don't want to think about it. I want to stay in my husband's house." "Don't sign anything," I said again. "Not a waiver, not a settlement, not so much as a receipt. Everything they're offering you is designed to make this look voluntary." She looked at me over the rim of her glass, eyes sharp despite the oxygen line, despite the 11 years of grief. "You know something, don't you?" "I know a great deal more than they think I know," I said. "Give it time." I drove home past the cemetery under the live oaks, past Elias, past Thomas, past my father. And I said, out loud, to nobody but the wind off the water, "Hold on, this one's going to take some paperwork, but it's going to be worth the wait." Here's where it gets interesting. 2 weeks passed, and I spent every one of them doing what I know how to do best, building a paper trail so thick a judge couldn't ignore it if he tried. I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled certified copies of everything. The fraudulent subdivision plat, all 25 warranty deeds, the Blue Water Point Holdings LLC formation documents filed with the Secretary of State. I paid the extra fee for certified copies with raised seals because certified copies hold up in court and photocopies get argued over. I requested a certified copy of my own 1911 patent from the Bureau of Land Management's General Land Office records. Took 11 days to arrive. And I checked that mailbox every single morning like a man waiting on a draft notice. I also drove out to the county surveyor's office and had an independent licensed surveyor, a man named Curtis Boyle, who'd worked with me on abstracts 20 years back, walk the peninsula boundary with me and cross-reference it against the 1911 meets and bounds description. Curtis is meticulous, a little slow, and exactly the kind of witness a judge trusts, because he has no stake in the outcome and he double-checks everything twice out of habit. "Walt," he said, standing under the live oaks near the cemetery, GPS unit in hand. This plat they filed doesn't just brush your property line, it's sitting dead center on top of it. Whoever drew this either never looked at a title abstract or looked at it and didn't care. I think it's the second one, I said. Curtis wrote up a formal boundary survey report, signed and sealed, dated, 3 copies. One for me, one filed with the county, one I mailed, certified, return receipt requested, to the Millers Lake Shores HOA Board of Directors, care of Vanessa Cole, President. That's the thing about certified mail. People assume it's just for legal drama. It's not. It creates a federal record through the Postal Service, proving exactly when someone received notice of a fact. Once Vanessa Cole signed for that green card, she could never again claim in court that she didn't know her plat was contested. I mailed her 3 more notices over the following month: formal demand to cease construction, formal notice of trespass, formal notice that I considered the sale of the 25 lots void ab initio, meaning void from the very beginning, as if it had never happened at all. And I kept every green return card in a manila folder that was getting thick enough to need a rubber band. Here's what most homeowners don't know. When you send formal notice like this, you're not just complaining, you're establishing what lawyers call actual notice, proof the other party knew, in writing, on a specific date, that their conduct was contested and potentially unlawful. After that date, anything they still do isn't a mistake anymore, it's willful. Vanessa Cole got my 3rd notice on a Thursday. By Saturday, she'd escalated. I know the exact time because Loretta Vance called me at 6:52 a.m., her voice thin and shaking, worse than I'd ever heard it. "Walter," she said, "they're here. They're cutting my oxygen line to the porch. They're saying it's an unauthorized utility fixture." I was in my truck in under 2 minutes. When I pulled into Loretta's gravel drive, there were 2 men in HOA polo shirts and Vanessa Cole herself, standing on the porch in a cream-colored blazer, clipboard in hand, directing one of the men to cut the exterior tubing that ran Loretta's home oxygen concentrator out to a small covered bench where she liked to sit mornings and watch the water. The concentrator itself, the medical device, sat just inside the door, but the extension line, the thing that let a 78-year-old widow with a lung condition sit outside in the morning air without dragging a 40-pound machine behind her, was being severed with a pair of bolt cutters. Loretta stood in her doorway, hand pressed against the frame, oxygen line pulled tight against her cheek where it's still connected to the shortened tubing, watching a piece of her freedom get cut away by a stranger in a polo shirt. I got my phone out before I even shut the truck door. I filmed all of it. Vanessa Cole's voice, clear as anything, saying, "This is an unpermitted exterior modification per Section 7 of the Covenant Handbook." Mrs. Vance was notified in writing twice. "We're well within our authority." "She's on oxygen," I said, walking up, phone still recording, voice level. "That tubing keeps her alive outside her own front door." Vanessa didn't even look at me at first. "Mr. Kessler, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me the moment I'm standing here filming it," I said. "And it's going to concern a judge real soon, because you don't have authority over this parcel any more than you have authority over mine." That got her attention. Her eyes flicked to my phone, then back to me, something calculating behind the sunglasses she still hadn't taken off, despite the overcast sky. "You've got quite an imagination, Mr. Kessler. Every deed in this subdivision is properly recorded. Every deed you sold is built on a plat that steals 11 acres my great-grandfather patented in 1911, I said. "I have the federal document, filed with the General Land Office, before the state of Texas ever recognized this so-called subdivision. You didn't sell lakefront property, Ms. Cole, you sold paper." For just a second, 1 second, caught clean on video, something cracked behind her composure. Her jaw tightened, her grip on the clipboard went white-knuckled. Then she recovered, smiled that same condescending smile, and said, "We'll let the court sort out your family folklore. In the meantime, Mrs. Vance is in violation, and violations have consequences." She turned and walked back to her Lexus, heels clicking on the gravel, and left the 2 men standing there holding a severed length of medical tubing. I didn't sue her that morning. I didn't confront her further. I helped the maintenance men, who looked frankly embarrassed and unsure what they'd just been ordered to do, reconnect a temporary line long enough to get Loretta comfortable again, and then I sat with her at her kitchen table while she caught her breath, her hands still trembling around a cup of tea she didn't drink. "I don't understand," she said. 11 years I've lived here since Frank passed. 11 years, nobody said a word, now this. "Because now there's 25 lots worth of money sitting behind it," I said. "And you're inconvenient, an old woman in a small cabin who might not fight back. But you're not fighting alone anymore, Loretta." I filed that video and every photo I took that morning into the manila folder, now needing 2 rubber bands, and I drove straight to the county courthouse. Here's what most homeowners don't know. Interfering with medical equipment or utilities essential to a disabled or elderly resident isn't just a covenant dispute. Depending on how it's charged, that kind of conduct can fall under Texas Penal Code provisions for criminal mischief. And, if it can be shown to be part of a pattern targeting a vulnerable person, it strengthens any civil fraud case tenfold in front of a jury. I wasn't a lawyer, but 31 years of reading land records taught me how these things fit together, and I knew exactly which attorney to call. Her name was Denise Okafor, a real estate litigator 2 counties over who'd handled title fraud cases before and had a reputation for not settling quietly. I drove to her office that same afternoon, folder in hand, video already backed up in 3 places. "Mr. Kessler," she said, after watching the video, flipping through the certified plat, the deeds, the patent copies, Curtis Boyle's survey report. "You've built almost the entire case yourself. All I need to do is file it correctly and get you in front of the right judge." "I want a public hearing," I said, "not a quiet settlement behind closed doors. I want the 25 lot owners there. I want the county. I want everyone who's been told this land belonged to somebody who never owned it in one room when the truth comes out." Denise smiled, the first genuine smile I'd gotten from a lawyer in longer than I cared to remember. "That," she said, "I can absolutely arrange." I drove home past the cemetery again that evening, past Elias, past Thomas, past my father, the sun dropping orange over the water, the way it had for over 100 years of Kessler's watching it do exactly that. I stopped at the gate, looked back at Loretta's porch light glowing faint through the trees, and thought about bolt cutters on an old woman's oxygen line. Vanessa Cole had just made her second mistake on camera. The first had been arrogance. This one was cruelty. And cruelty, once it's documented, doesn't need me to punish it. It just needs a courtroom, a judge, and 25 families finally learning where their $92,000 actually went. The community center at Millers Lake Shores holds about 120 people, folding chairs, bad fluorescent lighting, a podium that wobbles if you lean on it. On the night of the emergency HOA hearing, it was standing room only. 25 lot owners packed the rows, along with Sheriff's Deputy Ramon Castillo, County Building Inspector Diane Ferris, a reporter from the Miller County Gazette I'd tipped off myself, and Denise Okafor sitting beside me at a folding table with a banker's box full of certified documents. Vanessa Cole stood at the front in a charcoal suit instead of her usual cream blazer, clipboard nowhere in sight this time, flanked by 2 HOA board members who looked like they already sensed which way the wind was blowing. She opened the meeting the way she opened every meeting. Smooth, controlled, dismissive. "Thank you all for coming. I understand there's been some confusion about the Tract R1 development, stirred up by one disgruntled resident who refuses to accept a properly recorded plat. I want to assure everyone tonight that all 25 lots are secure and any claims otherwise are baseless." "Miss Cole," Denise Okafor said, standing, voice calm and carrying, "I'd like to enter into this meeting's record, in front of these witnesses, a certified copy of United States Federal Homestead Patent number 21,447, issued April 1911, describing the entire Millers Lake Peninsula by full meets and bounds survey." She walked it up to the podium herself and set it down in front of Vanessa Cole, the paper old and brittle under its protective sleeve, the raised BLM seal catching the fluorescent light. "This patent," Denise continued, predates the Millers Lake Shores subdivision plat by 61 years. It has never been subdivided, sold, or conveyed by the Kessler family in 111 years of continuous ownership. Mr. Kessler is prepared to testify, and licensed surveyor Curtis Boyle has already provided a certified boundary survey. She set that document down too, confirming that Tract R1, as platted by this association, sits entirely within federally patented Kessler family land. The room went dead quiet, except for someone's folding chair creaking. Vanessa Cole's face didn't crack right away. She'd had practice holding a smile through worse. "This is a civil matter for the courts, not a community meeting," she said. "I fail to see." "It's a criminal matter too," Deputy Castillo said, stepping forward from where he'd been standing near the door, and every head in that room turned. Cole, we've received a formal fraud complaint, corroborated by county records, showing that Blue Water Point Holdings, LLC, of which you are sole registered agent, received $2,300,000 from 25 separate buyers for property the association never legally owned. That's when Rick Halloway, the man I'd met unloading lawn furniture on my grandfather's old hayfield, the one who'd waved and told me about his new Lot 14, stood up in the third row, face red, voice cracking. "You told us this was clean title. You told us there was title insurance. My wife and I put our retirement savings into that cabin." Another voice from the back, a woman. "We sold our house in Houston for this lot." The room was turning into noise now. 25 families realizing in real time exactly what I'd known for weeks. And Vanessa Cole was standing at the podium with nowhere to put her hands. I stood up. The room quieted again, out of some old habit people have of listening to the man who stayed silent the whole meeting. "I want to be clear about something," I said. "This isn't about me getting back at a neighbor. I don't care about being right. I care about 111 years of my family being buried under that water, not getting paved over for somebody's profit. And I care about what she did 2 weeks ago." I looked at Loretta Vance, sitting in the second row, oxygen line clipped under her nose, hands folded in her lap, chin up. Ms. Cole ordered her people to cut an oxygen line off a 78-year-old widow's porch because she painted a shed. I have that on video. I have every certified letter, every notice, every deed. This was never confusion. This was a scheme, and everyone in this room paid for it. Building Inspector Diane Ferris stepped forward next, folder in hand. "I'll add that all 25 structures on Tract R1 were built without valid county permits, since the underlying plat itself was fraudulently filed. Every one of those cabins is subject to a stop work order as of tonight, pending resolution of ownership." That's when Vanessa Cole finally broke. Not into tears, into fury. She grabbed her clipboard off the podium, even though there was nothing on it that mattered anymore, and said, voice sharp, "You have no idea what you're accusing me of. This community would not exist without me. I built this." "You built it on land you stole," I said quietly, "from a family that was here before this lake had a name people recognized." Deputy Castillo stepped up beside her. "Miss Cole, given the fraud complaint, the corroborating financial records, and probable cause established here tonight, I need you to come with me." The handcuffs went on in front of 120 of her own homeowners, under fluorescent lights, with a reporter's camera flashing twice before Castillo asked him to stop. Vanessa Cole didn't say the smooth, condescending thing this time. She didn't say anything at all. She just stared at the federal patent still sitting on the podium under the light. The one document her entire scheme had never accounted for, and let herself be led out the double doors past 25 people who trusted her with their savings. The room didn't erupt into applause. It was quieter than that, a kind of exhausted, exhaled relief. The sound of people realizing the thing they'd been afraid of for months finally had a name and a face, and now handcuffs. I sat back down next to Loretta. She reached over and put her hand on my arm, oxygen hissing softly beside her. "Frank would have liked you," she said. Reverse she made move through the county district court over the following 7 months. I won't pretend it was quick, these things never are, but the paper trail Denise Okafor and I built left the prosecution almost nothing to argue against. Vanessa Cole pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony theft by deception under Texas Penal Code and 1 count of criminal mischief related to the oxygen tubing incident, avoiding a full trial in exchange for a sentencing agreement that still put her away for 4 years, with mandatory full restitution. The court ordered her to repay the full $2.3 million collected through Blue Water Point Holdings LLC, plus $340,000 in additional damages covering permitting costs, legal fees, and demolition of the illegally constructed cabins, bringing her total court-ordered obligation to just over $2.6 million. Her assets, including the cabins, are worth less than $1.6 million. $4 million. Her assets, including the Lexus, a lake house of her own 2 counties over, and a retirement account, were seized and liquidated toward that debt, though the court noted it would likely take her the better part of a decade, if not longer, to satisfy the full amount from prison wages and post-release earnings. 2 HOA board members who'd rubber-stamped the fraudulent plat resolution without ever reading it were removed from any future HOA leadership statewide by court order and fined $15,000 each for negligent breach of fiduciary duty. Neither faced criminal charges, having genuinely not known what they were signing, a fact I confirmed myself going back through meeting minutes, because I believe in being accurate even about the people I don't like. The 25 lot owners, including Rick Halloway, received full refunds of their $92,000 purchase price from the restitution fund, along with reimbursement for closing costs. I personally waived any trespass or damage claims against them individually, since none of them had known the ground under their new cabins had never been for sale. I did require, as part of the settlement, that every structure be removed from the peninsula within 90 days, restoring the shoreline to what it had been. Most of the families took the buyout and left quietly, relieved. A few thanked me on their way out, which I hadn't expected. Loretta Vance's medical equipment tampering charge against Cole stood on its own, and the judge specifically cited it as an aggravating factor in sentencing, a calculated act of cruelty against a disabled elderly resident, undertaken to suppress opposition to a criminal enterprise. It took the demolition crews 6 weeks to clear the 25 cabins off the peninsula. I stood on my porch and watched the last flatbed roll out down the gravel lane my great-grandfather cut in 1911, and for the first time in over a year, the shoreline looked like it belonged to itself again. The county, at Denise's suggestion and with the full support of the remaining HOA board, voted Loretta Vance in as the association's new president, an old woman with an oxygen line who'd never once wanted power, put in charge specifically because everyone finally understood she was the one person in that community who couldn't be bought. I rebuilt the dock that fall, same cedar, same nail pattern my great-grandfather used, working slow the way he must have, one board at a time. I still eat breakfast at his table every morning, elbow resting on that same scarred, shorter leg. Here's what I learned, if it's worth anything to you. Silence isn't weakness, it's ammunition if you use it to document instead of to hide. Paper outlives arrogance every single time. And the people who prey on the vulnerable always underestimate the quiet ones standing nearby, watching, writing down the time. 6 months after the sentencing, I got a letter from the state land office. Somebody down in Austin had started asking questions about 3 other lake developments across 2 counties, all tied to shell companies with familiar names. Looks like Vanessa Cole wasn't working alone after all.